So today, I wanted to make this video just to talk a little bit about a piece of advice that I would put out there for both people with TS and those of you who know people with TS. Biggest piece of advice I would have for anyone with Turner syndrome is find places in your local community where you can get plugged in socially. Especially if you can find something that's geared toward your own age group. For me, I found that my Bible study group at my church filled some of that need. Really nice thing about it is it's people who are in my age group. So it's been very helpful to not only be able to make social connections with people who are in the same stage of life as me, but it's helpful sometimes to know, okay, I'm not the only one who goes through with just craziness in life. We all go through different things, whether or not we have things like Turner syndrome. Another thing I would say on that same note is if you have Turners, definitely get plugged in with the Turner syndrome community. I honestly wish I had done this sooner, but I really didn't feel the desire to get plugged in this way until probably this past year. One great way to get to know people with TS, every other month, the organization Turner Syndrome Society of the United States, they host Zoom calls based on age brackets. So I try to, when they have the Zoom calls, hop on these calls for the 20-somethings. And I've got a group chat that's been nice to be a part of with people who have been on those calls. It's a very helpful thing to have those kind of connections, especially when things come up in life where it's okay, I'm going through this thing that other people I know who don't have Turner syndrome aren't necessarily going through this, but I have these connections of people who probably are dealing with the same things health-wise as I am, or dealing with the medical system, because that is its own chaotic mess. I know in some areas they do also host in-person events. In my area, we don't really have a local chapter with TSSUS. So for me, I mainly get to plug in virtually on the Zoom calls that we have with the 20-somethings. Another great way to get plugged in, beyond those two things, every year the Turner Syndrome Society holds an annual national conference where we have a bunch of speakers come in and they give presentations about different things that are often seen with women with Turner syndrome and the things we go through. And they give a lot of good information about what's the latest guidelines and recommendations on stuff, and providing different resources. It's also another time you get to be in a place where you're just surrounded with other women with Turner syndrome. Like, I was honestly a little overwhelmed this past summer going to the Portland conference and just walking in the lobbies seeing all these women who I was like, oh, I can tell they all have Turner syndrome because they look more like me, at least height-wise. So on to my next thing. One huge piece of advice I would give to anyone with Turner's: be willing to ask for help when you need it. Don't force yourself to think that you have to deal with things all by yourself. That's something that I honestly have struggled with a lot in my life, especially as I've reached my adult years and dealing with different transitions. I've found myself different times digging myself into my own messy hole because I assumed, oh, I gotta do this myself. I'm an adult now. It would have helped me so much if I had just simply asked for help if I didn't know what I was doing. And so, on the other side of the coin, if you're somebody who has a connection to a woman with Turner syndrome, I would say be willing to respect when we want to try to figure things out on our own. Give us the space and time to try to solve it ourselves if we're not asking for help. Because a lot of times we can figure stuff out. We just need the extra processing time to assess what the situation is and then reason through what we need to do to figure it out. So don't just automatically jump in and assume that we can't do it ourselves. But you should still probably be willing and ready to offer advice and help. If we're coming to you and telling you about what we're going through. Now, I know in my own experience, I know I don't necessarily take advice easily. I can be a bit stubborn and resistant to listening to advice when advice is given. But if you step away from me after I've been given a piece of advice on what I could try to do to solve my problem, I just need that time and space to be able to think through and process what you told me that I could do to try to help myself through the problem. And given enough time, I'll usually think through it and realize, okay, that actually makes sense. No, this is something I can definitely try doing. So, if you do give me advice and I seem a bit resistant to it, just know I'm going to need probably a little bit of space to reason through it. So, one of the biggest challenges I know I've had to deal with related to my Turners has been the transition between pediatric doctors and non-pediatric doctors. This was one of those things I kind of forced myself to try to take on by myself, and I ended up being in a spot where I turned 21 and I did not have things lined up. So, advice there would be, if you are not yet transitioning from pediatric to adult care, do what you can to, ahead of time, in getting that research on, okay, who are my local doctors who I can see about these different things that I need to see doctors for. You know, it's not easy, regardless of when you do it, but it's so much more helpful, I think, if you could get it figured out before you age out of pediatrics. You know, you don't want to have a gap in your care. But above all, best thing I can say is, if you have Turners, approach challenges with the mindset that you can get through it, because you can. Don't limit yourself. And be willing to be patient with yourself. You know, I've had to learn, and my parents have honestly had to learn too, that sometimes things just take more time for me, and it's okay. We plan accordingly sometimes. But don't get frustrated with yourself just because things might take a bit longer.